Hollywood has deliberately killed dozens of its own movies across the last century. I'm not talking about box office bombs. I'm talking about completed films that studios actively sabotaged, shelved, or literally burned. I've got a $90 million superhero movie that legally cannot exist anymore. I've got Jerry Lewis's forbidden Holocaust film that nobody was allowed to see for 50 years. And I've got Charlie Chaplin ordering negatives destroyed in front of witnesses for a tax deduction back in 1933. The reasons studios do this are darker than you'd expect. Let's get into it. Nearly a century before Warner Brothers made tax write-offs trendy, Charlie Chaplin invented the playbook. A Woman of the Sea was a 1926 drama he produced for his former leading lady Edna Purviance, hiring the then unknown Josef von Sternberg to direct. The budget was around $90,000. For context, that was real money in the silent era. Chaplin expected a modest return on a prestige picture for an actress he felt loyal to. Box office? Zero. The film was never released. Not a single ticket sold. Here's where it gets wild, though. Von Sternberg held a secret preview against Chaplin's wishes. Critics called it beautiful but empty. Chaplin shelved it indefinitely. Then, in 1933, when the IRS started investigating his finances, Chaplin ordered every single negative burned on June 21st in front of 5 witnesses. He did this specifically to claim the production cost as a total loss. This is the earliest documented case of a Hollywood film being deliberately destroyed for tax purposes. The footage is gone forever. Von Sternberg went on to direct classics with Marlene Dietrich. Purviance stayed on Chaplin's payroll until she passed away in 1958. Maybe guilt money for incinerating her big starring role. We'll never know. Speaking of cynical maneuvers, Winter Dragon might be the most shameless rights grab in television history. This 22-minute Wheel of Time adaptation aired at 1:30 in the morning on FXX in February 2015. And yes, that was the plan all along. Red Eagle Entertainment held the TV and film rights to Robert Jordan's beloved fantasy series. Those rights were set to expire on February 11, 2015. 3 days before the deadline, they paid FXX to air this thing in an infomercial slot. The budget was minimal. The production value looked like a PlayStation 2 cutscene. Billy Zane showed up to say the word Ilyina approximately 20 times in a single room. Red Eagle CEO Rick Selvage admitted it openly to IO9. It was more of an issue of getting it on the air. That's not even subtext. That's just text. Robert Jordan's widow, Harriet McDougal, was furious. She said it was made without her knowledge or cooperation. Red Eagle actually sued her for slander before quietly withdrawing the case. The gambit worked, though. Red Eagle retained enough of a claim to become consulting producers on the Amazon Wheel of Time series that launched in 2021. Sometimes the most cynical play wins. This next one's almost tragic because the film itself was actually good. Tears of the Black Tiger was a gorgeous, bizarre Thai Western melodrama that became a hit in Thailand and the first Thai film ever selected for Cannes' Un Certain Regard section. Harvey Weinstein's Miramax bought the US distribution rights. You'd think that meant American audiences would get to see it. They didn't. Miramax recut it, showed the butchered version at Sundance 2002, then locked it in the vault and never released it. Director Wisit Sasanatyang later said, "We were too innocent. We believed that they would respect our work." Here's the thing though, this wasn't an isolated incident. Journalist Edward J. Epstein documented a perverse financial incentive at Miramax. The Weinstein's bonuses were calculated on grosses of films released in a given year, while expenses for unreleased acquisitions didn't count against them. Translation, they had structural motivation to hoard distribution rights and simply never release films. Tears of the Black Tiger was eventually rescued and released by Magnolia Pictures years later. But Miramax's vault was full of films that never got that lucky. Salt of the Earth holds a distinction no other American film can claim. It's the only movie ever blacklisted by Hollywood itself, not banned by the government, suppressed by the industry from the inside. The film was made by blacklisted creators. Director Herbert Biberman was one of the Hollywood 10 and served 6 months in federal prison. They formed an independent company specifically to make films outside the studio system. The result was a drama about a New Mexico miners' strike. What happened next was the most comprehensive suppression campaign in American film history. Howard Hughes personally outlined in a detailed letter the steps that could be taken to destroy the film during post-production. A literal blueprint for sabotage. Pathé Laboratories in Hollywood refused to process their exposed film. Star Rosaura Revueltas was deported to Mexico by immigration authorities during filming as a deliberate move to halt production. The Union Hall in Bayard was set on fire. Projectionist unions refused to show the finished film. The American Legion blocked bookings. Hearst newspapers refused to acknowledge its existence. Producer Paul Jericho later captured the defiance. "We wanted to commit a crime to fit the punishment." The film wasn't generally released until 1965 and was selected for the National Film Registry in 1992. Vindication came, but it took 40 years. Fanboys is the film that proved Star Wars fans will go to war for something they believe in. This was a Stand By Me style dramedy about friends making a pilgrimage to Skywalker Ranch. One of them is terminally ill. That's the emotional core of the entire movie. The Weinstein Company acquired it around 2006. Harvey Weinstein then ordered the terminal illness subplot removed entirely. He wanted a broader teen comedy instead. Per The Hollywood Reporter, Harvey feels it's hard to market, especially with this cast. Weinstein hired a different director to helm $2 million in reshoots, creating an alternate version. The Weinstein version tested lower. The 501st Legion organized an international boycott, generating over 300,000 emails and protests on both coasts. They called him Darth Weinstein. The studio capitulated, but the win was hollow. Director Kyle Newman was given exactly 36 hours to reconstruct his original cut from Weinstein's butchered version. The film finally released on February 6, 2009, on just 40 screens with virtually no marketing. I actually feel bad for everyone involved except the guy who caused the problem in the first place. This one's almost the opposite. The current war had real talent. Benedict Cumberbatch, Michael Shannon, Nicholas Hoult, Tom Holland. A $30 million prestige picture about Edison versus Westinghouse. Oscar bait on paper. It premiered at Toronto on September 9th, 2017. But here's the thing. It was Weinstein's cut, not the director's, rushed to completion before post-production had finished. Director Alfonso Gomez-Rejon later told Deadline, "It landed with a thud there and left me crushed and wondering if my career was over." The theatrical release was scheduled for November 24th as an awards contender. Then the New York Times expose broke on October 5th. Release pulled indefinitely. The Weinstein Company declared bankruptcy. The director invoked a clause in Martin Scorsese's producer contract granting final cut, blocking the bankrupt company from releasing Weinstein's edit internationally. The director's cut finally reached theaters on October 25, 2019, 2 full years late. A film that might have been an Oscar contender arrived as an afterthought. The UK actually got the Weinstein cut anyway, despite the filmmakers begging them not to release it. Sometimes there's no winning. Sergio Leone spent over a decade trying to make Once Upon a Time in America. His 229-minute crime epic premiered at Cannes in 1984 to a 15-minute standing ovation. European audiences embraced it as a masterpiece. Then the Ladd Company hired an editor who had worked on Police Academy to cut 90 minutes out without Leone's involvement or consent. The entire non-linear flashback structure was gutted. Scenes were rearranged into chronological order, leaving gaping plot holes everywhere. Roger Ebert called the US version an incomprehensible mess without texture, timing, mood, or sense. James Woods recalled one critic calling the butchered cut the worst film of 1984, only to see the European version years later and call it the best of the entire decade. Leone was heartbroken. He passed away from a heart attack in 1989 at age 60, never seeing his masterpiece properly embraced in America. A 251-minute restoration was completed in 2014, and the film is now widely regarded as one of the greatest ever made. The US sabotage is provably why it failed commercially. The same film was simultaneously a masterpiece in Europe and an incomprehensible disaster in America. Greed, 1924. MGM didn't just bury Greed, they burned it for the silver. Erich von Stroheim's adaptation of Frank Norris's novel ran approximately 8 to 9 hours in its original rough cut. One reporter who saw an early screening called it wonderful and brilliant, but lamented no one else would ever see it. Von Stroheim cut it to around 5 hours. Director Rex Ingram cut it to 4 hours and told von Stroheim, "If you cut one more frame, I shall never speak to you again." Then the Goldwyn Company merged with Metro Pictures on April 10, 1924, placing Irving Thalberg directly in charge. Thalberg had previously fired von Stroheim from Universal. A confrontation allegedly turned physical, ending with Louis B. Mayer punching the director. MGM assigned an editor to reduce the film to 2 hours and 20 minutes, roughly a quarter of the original. Von Stroheim's reaction: "It was like opening a coffin in which there was just dust, giving off a terrible stench." Then MGM burned all the excised footage to extract the silver from the nitrate stock. No copies of the original exist. Film archivists have called the uncut version the holy grail of cinema. It's gone forever. Event Horizon, 1997. Paramount didn't deliberately sabotage Event Horizon, but they might as well have. Director Paul W. S. Anderson delivered a 130-minute cut of his space horror film. Paramount compressed post-production from the standard 10 weeks down to 6 weeks to fill a summer gap, created by Titanic's delays. The budget was $60 million. It made $42 million worldwide, commercial disappointment by any measure. Here's where it gets worse, though. Anderson could only assemble a rough cut under that timeline. The first test screening horrified the studio. A Paramount executive told him, "We're the studio that makes Star Trek." The film was slashed from 130 minutes to 96 minutes, removing extensive sequences and character development. The excised footage was stored in a Transylvanian salt mine. It deteriorated beyond repair. Paramount had junked the rest in the late 90s before the DVD boom made deleted scenes valuable. Anderson told Entertainment Weekly, "We were going out on VHS. There was no reason for the studio to keep it." The Lost Director's Cut has become one of cinema's most sought-after holy grails. The theatrical version became a massive cult classic anyway. Imagine what the full film could have been. Coyote vs. Acme, 2023/shelved. Rescued, 2025. Warner Brothers. Discovery shelved Coyote vs. Acme in November 2023, despite the fact that it tested 14 points above the family film norm. The $70 million live-action animation hybrid was complete. Audiences loved it. WBD took a $30 million write-down anyway. Will Forte called the shelving, and I'm quoting here, "Fing bullsht." Writer-director Ben David Grabinski said, "The ending makes everyone fing cry. I thought the goal of this business was to make hit movies." Congressman Joaquin Castro escalated it to the federal level, calling the tactic predatory and anti-competitive, and comparing it to burning down a building for the insurance money. You'd think this story ends badly. It doesn't. WBD reversed course within days, allowing the director to shop the film. Amazon, Netflix, Apple, and Paramount all screened it. On March 31st, 2025, Ketchup Entertainment completed acquisition for around $50 million. The film is scheduled for theatrical release on August 28, 2026. A rare case of a tax write-off being resurrected. The system doesn't always win. The New Mutants spent 3 years in development purgatory and became the final ignominious entry in Fox's 20-year X-Men franchise. It was filmed in summer 2017 and originally set for release in April 2018. Budget was around $67 million. It made $47 million worldwide, the lowest grossing X-Men film ever. Here's what happened. The film was delayed for planned reshoots to make it scarier. Scope: reshoot 50% of the movie. Then Disney acquired Fox in March 2019. The reshoots never happened. Disney was reportedly unimpressed with the film and wary of its financial prospects, but contractual clauses guaranteed a theatrical release, preventing Disney from quietly dumping it on streaming. By the time it reached screens during the pandemic in August 2020, the cast had literally aged out of their teenage roles. Director Josh Boone told Den of Geek, "We were sort of kicked under the curb until Disney took over. No marketing, empty theaters, a mercy release for a film nobody at the new studio wanted anyone to see. The Magnificent Ambersons, 1942. Orson Welles made Citizen Kane and followed it with The Magnificent Ambersons. Then RKO destroyed his vision while he was out of the country. Welles was in Brazil shooting a documentary for the US government's Good Neighbor policy when the studio seized his film after a disastrous test screening. The budget was around $1.1 million. RKO cut Welles's 131-minute version down to 88 minutes. Only 13 of the original 73 scenes were left untouched. A tacked-on happy ending was filmed without Welles's approval. Composer Bernard Herrmann demanded his credit be removed when half his score was excised. Then, RKO did something unforgivable. They burned the silver nitrate negatives of all the cut footage to salvage the silver and free vault space. The excised material is permanently destroyed. In 1980, Wells sat down to watch the film with filmmaker Henry Jaglom. After about an hour, he turned off the television and said, "From here on, it becomes their movie." Despite the butchering, it earned 4 Academy Award nominations and was selected for the National Film Registry in 1991. We can only see it in mutilated form. Brazil, 1985. Terry Gilliam delivered Brazil under budget. Universal president Sid Sheinberg demanded a shorter cut and a happy ending. Gilliam refused. Universal created the Love Conquers All version anyway, a 94-minute edit that transformed the bleak ending into one where the hero escapes with his love. Budget was $15 million. US box office was around $9.9 million. But those numbers don't tell the real story. Gilliam's response was extraordinary. He wrote to Sheinberg, "I feel every cut, especially the ones that sever the balls." Sheinberg used the word terrorist when discussing Gilliam. Gilliam took out a full-page ad in Variety. "Dear Sid Sheinberg, when will you release my movie Brazil?" He organized guerrilla screenings at universities and in a Beverly Hills mansion. The Los Angeles Film Critics Association saw Gilliam's cut in secret and awarded it Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Screenplay before it was officially released. Under mounting pressure, Universal finally released Gilliam's version in December 1985. The film now holds 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. Sometimes the director wins. It just takes a full-page ad and a public shaming campaign. The Day the Clown Cried, 1972. Jerry Lewis's Holocaust drama has been cinema's most notorious unreleased film for over 50 years. Lewis played a washed-up clown who leads children to gas chambers at Auschwitz. Filming began in March 1972 in Paris, then moved to Sweden, where the financing collapsed. Lewis claimed to have invested $2 million of his own money to finish shooting. The project collapsed in a legal nightmare. The producer's option on the screenplay had expired before filming began. The screenwriter was never paid and refused to grant release rights. Harry Shearer saw a rough cut in 1979 and delivered the film's most famous review in Spy magazine. "This movie is so drastically wrong, its pathos and its comedy are so wildly misplaced that you could not, in your fantasy of what it might be like, improve on what it really is." Lewis's statements evolved over the decades. In 2013, he finally admitted, "I was embarrassed, I was ashamed of the work, and I was grateful that I had the power to contain it all." He donated a copy to the Library of Congress with a stipulation it not be screened publicly until 2024. Then in May 2025, Swedish media revealed that a complete work print had been sold to an unknown buyer. The most forbidden film in Hollywood history may finally be seen. I'm honestly not sure anyone should want to see it. Warner Bros. Discovery shelved Batgirl in August 2022. The $90 million superhero film was nearly complete. It starred Leslie Grace with Michael Keaton returning as Batman. Directors Adil El Arbi and Bilal Fallah learned the news while El Arbi was in Morocco for his wedding. The film was a product of the pre-merger Warner Bros. Regime. CEO David Zaslav's new team saw no value in releasing it. On the August earnings call, Zaslav offered his rationale. "We're not going to launch a movie until it's ready, particularly with DC, where we think we want to pivot. Here's the financial mechanism that makes this permanent. By taking the write-off under purchase accounting rules created by the Discovery merger, WBD cannot monetize the film in any form, ever. No theatrical release, no streaming debut, no sale to another studio. The $90 million is classified as part of $825 million in content impairments." Leslie Grace posted, "To every Batgirl fan, thank you for the love and belief, allowing me to take on the cape." Brendan Fraser called the cancellation tragic and said it doesn't engender trust among filmmakers and the studio. DC Studios co-head Peter Safran later stated bluntly, "Batgirl was not releasable, a $90 million movie that legally cannot exist. That's where we are now." These 15 films reveal something uncomfortable about Hollywood. The industry has always been willing to destroy art for accounting purposes. From Chaplin burning negatives in 1933 to Warner Brothers vaporizing Batgirl in 2022, the playbook hasn't really changed. Tax write-offs, creative disputes, acquisition casualties. ashcan copies made solely to retain IP rights. The pattern keeps repeating because the incentives never change. New executives have zero investment in their predecessors' projects. Mergers create purchase accounting loopholes. Rights holders would rather air garbage at 1:30 a.m. than let properties revert. And sometimes, the simplest explanation is that someone in a corner office just didn't like what they saw. I don't think this trend is going anywhere. If anything, the streaming era and endless corporate consolidation will make it worse. More mergers mean more orphaned projects. More tax strategies mean more completed films getting shelved. The only variable is whether anyone fights back. Sometimes they do. Usually they don't. And the footage ends up in a salt mine or reduced to silver.